may have seen the work in the front gallery using the figural elements, the human hand, and this really is the germ of where this series came from. This idea of making, of fabrication, the idea of engineering as a metaphor, the idea that at some level we try to create for ourselves the world we wish we possessed. And in developing these ideas, I started working with the idea of bridges as a metaphor, as well as a visual structure to the idea. And while I was working with the bridges, working on these open web trusses in my studio, I had a bunch of them stacked up against the wall one day. Someone came to visit and said, "Are those ladders?" I said, "Oh no, they're not ladders. They're just trusses, they're against the wall." And then I took another look, and I realized that they really were ladders in a sense, that ladders were a type of a bridge. They were a means for physical transposition in space. They're also a means to an end, they're a tool. And we use ladders to make things, we use ladders to modify things. We climb them, but we come back down to where we started. But perhaps while we're up on the ladder, we accomplish something. Even if we come back to where we started, we've attained something in the process of being on the ladder. So the ladder for me has become this idea of potential in a very simple object. This is a similar intention with this one. We have the contrast between the pragmatic, practical, nearly used up ladder at the bottom. At the top, it's almost the platonic ideal of ladder, simplified, elegant, stripped to the purity of its essentials, but at the same time, not really functional. And we come back to looking at that practical ladder with a new eye. In this, we have something that shows all the evidence of fabrication of the intervention of the human hand, something that is the product of a tinkerer's workbench made from elements that we can identify. It has references to all of the crackpot and semi-crackpot flying machines of the past. We look at it, and even without an aeronautics degree, we can see this thing is just not feasible. It doesn't make sense. It's not going to fly, and we know this in our gut. And if we're not sure, a flying machine with a cord has certain inbuilt limitations. And while it's up there, we can suspend our disbelief. We have this moment of optimism, where we can hope, in the face of inevitable failure, that it still might possibly work. And it's this idea of optimism in the face of futility that I see as sort of an essential underlying nobility of the human spirit, this desire to keep trying even in the face of absurdity and even in the face of impossibility.
My work is the last Louis Sullivan Friends. And I worked for many years at SIU, Edwardsville, as curator of the University Museum. And one of the collections that we have there is the Louis Sullivan Architectural Ornament Collection. And so in this group of works here, I've included some photographs of Sullivan's work, as well as my own pieces to show the inspiration for these pieces. They actually came about as a bit of an accident. I simply wanted to enlarge some small plants so that I could see them better. So I started scanning these into the computer and enlarging them on the screen so that I could get a better idea of the construction of the plants. One thing led to another. Eventually I was scanning in plants, and oxidized metals, and weatherboard. I found that with the computer, I can start combining these elements. So Sullivan used a combination of geometric shapes, plant motifs to build the ornament for his billboard, to come up with designs for the ornament. So, in working with the computer, I found that I could make geometric shapes directly from the plant materials themselves. So I started with a series of small plants, small frame plants, and as I got a little better at working with the computer and learning the software packages, I began to get larger and larger, and so I'm at the point that you see now in terms of scale. It all depends on whether or not I can get my hands on a larger printer as to what scale they might eventually take. So I think subconsciously, over the years, filed away a lot of information on Sullivan, his design, it just found its way out through this series of works.
You will all have to excuse me, I didn't know I'd have to sing for my supper tonight. Because I would have brought like a chimp on a bicycle or something, you know, to entertain you. I'm the person with the needle back there that has the work back there. I am self-taught. Both of my degrees actually are in ceramics. And I do see a common correlation with the way I work my surfaces texturally and how they correspond to what clay can do. Back in 1999, I went on a plane trip, and I'm one of those keyed up, high-strung people. And I don't fly very well, and I wasn't able to get to my doctor and get a Xanax for the trip. So I just threw a bunch of skeins of floss into a bag, and I decided to try one portrait. And the portrait worked, and I see where it could carry me on through my love of biography. I've always been interested in people's lives, people through history, because I do believe that history does repeat itself. I'm interested in what people wear, what kind of shoes they like, what kind of music they listen to, who are their friends, who they've slept with, who they've known. I love all of that sort of stuff as it pertains to history. This group is I sort of called it Saints and Sinners because we all have sort of preconceptions of how we view people and what we think about them. Most of us don't want to say what we think about certain people, but I wanted to group these people together because we would have a preconceived notion of if they're a good person or a bad person. And growing up, it also reminds me of growing up going to church functions and bazaars where there'd be comfortable food on tables made by comfortable women, and sort of walking around with them, you would hear things like, she makes a really good potato salad, she's going to burn in hell, but she makes a good potato salad. and stuff like that. Even these pious people could still have an edge to them. I found really interesting. So these are pieces that comprise Saints and Sinners. And if anybody has any questions, I'm very approachable, and I'm a very frank person, so if you have any questions, let me know.
We'll mix and mingle, and I hope that if these talk about the art posed any questions,